An understanding of reading is crucial to the development of our tests. Constructs of reading are based upon the conception of reading we adopt and the kinds of factors we consider affect this activity. Even though there are numerous approaches to reading, the Skarborov's rope model is frequently cited for its straightforward nature. This model distinguishes between two main components of reading: word decoding and language comprehension. Word decoding, that is, the ability to read words out of context, includes the following subcomponents: letter sound knowledge or phonological awareness, accurate word decoding based on the alphabetic principle, and automaticity in decoding based on visual recognition. Language comprehension, on the other hand, that is, the ability to understand words, sentences, and text, includes activating word meanings, understanding language structures, making inferences, monitoring comprehension, and understanding text structure. The strands of the rope illustrate the interconnectedness and interdependence of both components and their subcomponents, meaning that reading can be constrained by any of them, even if the others are present in great quantities. The extent to which readers are skillful in these reading components rely on factors that pertain to the person or the text. We borrowed Bachman and Palmer's framework of test takers' characteristics to identify important features of the reader, including personal characteristics such as sex, age, general level of education, and L1. Their topical or background knowledge, their knowledge about the language of the text, the affective schemata, which is thought as the emotional response of the reader to the topic of the reading, but in which we can also include the motivation or interest in reading and the attitude to the language of the text, and a strategic competence, that is, the reader's conscious capacity to set goals, plan, and monitor language use with reference to a reading task. The text in itself also has influence on the reading experience. Breakdowns of comprehension can be caused by failures of familiarity with key vocabulary or background knowledge presupposed by the text, by failures of knowledge of text genres, by failures of knowledge of cohesion strategies, and by failures to address syntactic complexity and lexical density. Even good readers may get low scores in a test only because of one or two characteristics of the text or reading situation. There are two clearly differentiated approaches to the reading process: the cognitive approach and the psycholinguistic approach. The cognitive approach conceptualizes the skills needed to read as separate. In order to reach comprehension, the reader must go through them in an ordered manner, from processing graphemic information and decoding words and syntax to activating meaning. In other words, reading is a bottom-up process. The reader reconstructs from the smallest units to the larger ones. The reading rope model is a result of this approach. On the contrary, the psycholinguistic approach does not divide reading into subskills, but conceptualizes it as a unitary activity and meaning-oriented, in which the reader brings previous knowledge and reading strategies that interact with the text. In other words, reading is viewed as a top-down process. The reader reconstructs from the larger units, word and text meaning, to the smallest ones, letters and words. The reader first anticipates meaning with a minimum use of printed stimuli, and if the syntactic, semantic, and pragmatic signs confirm his or her hypothesis, reading comprehension is successful. However, if the meaning predicted doesn't conform to the text information, the reader must retrieve graphemic information in order to correct him or herself. It is known that skillful readers spend less time identifying visual signals and have more resources available to resort to higher order processing. Therefore, bottom-up processing is associated with poor readers, and top-down processing is associated with skillful readers. Reading is operationalized through the selection of text and the test items developed to measure it. How we operationalize a construct, however, largely depends on its conceptualization and the purpose of the test. For example, if the construct of reading is defined as being composed of different subskills, a common notion in ESL teaching and testing, it is operationalized by items that require test takers to perform each of the subskills considered. If one of those subskills is skimming, it will be operationalized by items that require test takers to go through a text and identify specific pieces of information. However, we may construct a single definition of the construct and yet operationalize it quite differently if we want to assess, for example, adult learners reading text for specific purposes or children who are beginner readers. Let's suppose our construct of reading includes making inferences. This subskill might be operationalized as answering questions with who, when, and what for the beginner child, but as something more elaborate for adults, such as inferring the meaning of an unknown word from context. To measure reading, we can adopt a discrete point test or an integrative test. Discrete point tests are used to measure just one aspect of reading ability, so they can serve the advocates of the cognitive approach. Meanwhile, the integrative test is used when we want to get a global overview of the reader's ability, whether we believe that reading can be broken down into subskills or not. Therefore, these tests serve the advocates of both the cognitive and psycholinguistic approaches. Finally, discrete testing is exclusively indirect, in the sense that it provides evidence of a specific knowledge or skills. Integrative tests can be both indirect and direct. For example, a paraphrasing item can assess more than one subskill, like drawing inferences and identifying main ideas, and it is still an indirect item.
Following what has been presented, part of the research and testing reading has focused on the further specification of the cognitive processes and abilities involved in reading. Up to this point, there is not a general agreement on which subskills underlie reading, nor on the limits between them. The other research topics have been around the development of items and tasks. Some items for teacher-made tests may be well constructed and presented, but they may fail to measure what they intend to measure. And for this reason, researchers have asked which items have greater validity and reliability. Researchers have investigated the factors that impact the reliability of test items and tasks, such as the flexibility of the item, ambiguity of the item, clarity, explicitness, and language of the instruction, types of scoring methods, etc. On the other hand, the tendency in testing reading comprehension is to use discrete items that focus on the process of recalling and identifying as a primary means to measure a test taker's comprehension. However, test designers have focused their attention on the development of procedures and tasks that evaluate aspects of comprehension that traditional ways do not assess, and that are authentic. Some of these procedures and tasks are interviews, questionnaires, observations, oral retelling, free writing, among others. Now let's think about the types of items and tasks that can be used for testing reading. The following item types and tasks have been taken from Bachman and Palmer, Alderson, Hughes, and Brown, and they can be broadly divided in three groups, as is shown in the diagram. The first group is selected response task types, or discrete point. In these items, the test taker selects an answer from a given group of options. These items are also characterized by testing one thing at a time, that is, they test individual components or subskills of reading comprehension, hence the name of discrete point items. Examples of such items are multiple choice, matching, judgments of true false or right wrong doesn't say, ordering tasks, editing tasks, and gapped texts. where the missing words, sentences, paragraphs, or headings are provided. The second and third group of item types and tasks are productive or integrative because they require the use of other skills such as writing and speaking to complete the item or task. The underlying idea of these items and tasks is that the whole is more than the sum of the parts. In other words, they test reading as a unitary activity. In the semi-productive tasks, the test takers employ a limited amount of writing. Some examples are gap texts, where the missing words are not provided, and information transfer tasks, where the test taker identifies in the target text the required information and then transfers it to a diagram, chart, or table. The productive tasks or integrated skills tasks are highly dependent on other language skills besides reading. For example, summaries, short answers, open-ended questions and discussions are some productive items and tasks where test takers use writing abilities to demonstrate their comprehension of a given text. And finally, a productive test task for reading comprehension is a free recall task, where test takers are asked to read a text, then put it aside and talk about everything they can remember from the text. Instead of illustrating some item types and tasks, we're going to briefly present a different way of testing reading comprehension through informal reading inventories. Informal reading inventories are individually administered batteries of word lists and reading passages that help to determine the student's reading level in terms of word recognition and meaning, and also comprehension of the text with regards to content, genre, organization, etc. Although IRIs are strictly speaking an informal way of assessing reading, they can be used to test reading comprehension and track the individual progress of students. In the following example taken from Maurice, the test taker reads a graded passage out loud and then the examiner asks some questions. The scoring provides measures of oral reading accuracy, rate, and comprehension at various levels. That is, comprehension at the levels of the word, the sentence, the text, or beyond. To finish off with this presentation, we'd like to share some practical implications. First, throughout the process of test development, keep in mind the purpose of the test, the construct that you want to measure, and the test takers. Second, the selection of texts is just as important as the construct and items in testing reading. Bear in mind the types of texts, such as extracts from books, newspaper and magazine articles, informal material, correspondence, etc., and also the characteristics of the texts, for instance, its language, genre, length, style, purpose, structure, subject matter, among others. Third, discrete points items may be easy and practical to construct and administer, but consider that integrated skill items and tasks provide an overall picture of how well the test takers read and also reflect more authentically how test takers may use the language in real-life situations. And finally, make sure to include in the test a variety of item types and tasks to ensure that the test takers perform at their best.